I recently finished reading The Brothers Karamazov, a book about a messy family, the problem of evil, and contradictions in a self-proclaiming Christian society. The author, Dostoevsky, was a Christian who was not afraid of these difficult problems in everyday life, and his works have made many wrestle with human nature, philosophy, and faith. So to celebrate these honest questions, I am excited to share with you an in-depth literary analysis on the characters, plots, and philosophical ideas in this book. I'm joking, of course. Instead, I have the opportunity of interviewing someone who has wrestled with these questions and come to a very different conclusion. All right, well, would you introduce yourself and tell us how you got interested in philosophy?
Sure. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, why did you invite me?
Why did we invite you? Well, I wanted to start doing some interviews on the channel, and you're such a great Donuts and Debate friend, so, and I think that we have good dialogue at Donuts and Debate. It's a event that we do every Sunday nights, right, where we talk about issues in philosophy, theology, even politics,
Yeah.
and yeah, you're really articulate, and I think it's fun to have people you disagree with.
Perfect. So my name is Jonathan David. I'm currently a computer science and physics major here at Calvin University. And yeah, I've been always interested in philosophy and theology because I used to have a lot of debates with my father since I was a kid about theology, science, all this stuff. So yeah, I was always like curious about how the world works in general, and philosophy is a really good way to ponder about these questions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so what is the most compelling argument for Christianity to you?
So to me, probably is the Kalam cosmological argument,
Oh yeah.
the one that says that, that because a universe exists, right, the universe should have a cause, and this cause, right, must be probably God, right? I feel like that's the most compelling argument since we don't really know how the universe started. We have a glimpse of it. We have like the theory of Big Bang, but the Big Bang theory actually doesn't tell you how it started. It doesn't tell you how anything about the Big Bang.
What caused the Big
Exactly.
Bang? Right? Yeah.
So in general, I would say that that's the most compelling argument. Although I would say that that argument, what shows is that definitely something has always existed. I don't know if it is the universe itself or if it is God, but definitely something has always existed. Yeah.
Good start. Yeah. Okay, what do you think is the least compelling argument or biggest problem with Christianity?
Okay, to me the biggest problem with Christianity is definitely the problem of evil. Because if you think that God is omnibenevolent and God is like all powerful and all these different properties of God, well, definitely when you see the reality, there is a contrast right there, right? You have like evil, and so you would ask yourself like, well, why is that there is evil, right? Like, what happened? So for example, myself, when I was 14 years old, I started asking these questions like, why is that there is evil, right? Like, I feel like this is something that a lot of teenagers do. So the conclusion that I came, or the reason, my reasoning behind was that, well, if God knows everything, and He knew that when He was going to create the world and the universe, evil was going to appear, right? So how is that He created, and He knew that Lucifer was going to fall? So to me, it was like, how is that God knowing that Lucifer was going to fall? He still created like all this universe, and He sees all this pain and all this stuff. So I feel like that's the most controversial argument for Christianity, even though there are certain responses and stuff like that. But I don't know, like, if you want to talk about them or.
Yeah, I figured you'd say that. So the next couple questions fit well. It would have been a little bit awkward if you said something different.
Yeah.
But then I wanted to talk about how, from your perspective, how has the church been handling the questions of evil in recent years?
Okay, so I feel the church is probably the one who has not responded yet in the best way. So obviously you have theologians and Christian philosophers that they've been pondering about these questions. So first of all, I feel like we have to give a little bit of context of where we are in history, and or when are we? That's like also an important question. And we have to think that 300 years ago, right? Or well, after the Middle Age, in the Middle Age you used to have like this control of the church over everything, you know, like they used to have control in science, in philosophy, in what you teach, in what you talk, and so on. So obviously people, they didn't they were not going to try to even think about some of these questions. To me, actually, it's because of the book of Job. I feel like the church took the book of Job, where in the book of Job, God tells Job like, "Who are you, right? Like, who are you to judge me, right?" So that's the most. I feel like that's where the church used that argument of the book of Job, and they internalize it in the structure of the church, right? So they were like, well, you cannot if you judge, if you start pondering about these questions, then you're criticizing the church, then you're criticizing God, right? So well, yeah, after that, in the Enlightenment, right, you have figures like Goethe with the Faust. This book is one of the most important books of the Enlightenment, where he actually criticizes the book of Job. He makes like not a mockery, but yeah, he criticizes like this argument of like that you shouldn't ponder about these questions, right? So I feel like after the Enlightenment, the problem in the Enlightenment is that the church didn't have a lot of answers for the big questions. So what you got out of the Enlightenment is that you have a lot of people that are atheists, agnostic, skeptics, and so on. You know what I mean? So the problem is that, yeah, with all this skepticism, right? You got all this skepticism out of the Enlightenment. So the question now is like, how do you go out of this, and how is the church treating these questions right now, right? That's your question. So the thing is like, I feel like 100 years ago is when philosophers like Alvin Plantinga and Nicholas Walterstorff, they actually started trying to answer these questions. Because if you go out and you ask like sometimes an average person like, oh, what do you think there is evil? Oh, don't think about that, right? Like our minds are so limited that you shouldn't even try to think about these questions, you know? All these guided by the Middle Age and the Book of Job. So I feel like it was Alvin Plantinga, the one who said like, wait a minute, actually we can go farther than this, right? We can try to actually think about the problem of evil and try to solve it in some way. So there are two different problems of evil: the natural problem of evil and the logical problem of evil. The logical problem of evil is the one that Alvin Plantinga solved, where what he actually showed is that there is a possibility, there is an actual possibility that God can exist and evil at the same time, because it was an illogical contradiction for God to create people with free will and not having not having evil. So evil is like some kind of like how can I say it, like it's something that appeared because people have free will. Now, just to finish, because I know this has been the longest answer.
It's fine, yeah.
I feel like definitely we should keep rethinking about these questions. The problem of the church is that they try to think about the static terms in static interpretations, or at least there is some part of the church that is trying to do that sometimes. They want to, they take the Bible as literal, everything is completely literal and static, right? So you shouldn't even try to think about the context of or the history of the Bible and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I think that they should stop doing this, because that's not how history has evolved. You have to understand the dialectics behind history in order to understand that everything is in constant change. And it's not that God is changing, it's that our interpretations of the Bible are changing based on another form of revelation. That another form of revelation is knowing more about the universe and the world, right? So we should try to ponder more about new interpretations, even in the problem of evil, like Alvin Plantinga did. But yeah, definitely. I feel like in the problem of evil right now, one of the big questions that I would make to Alvin Plantinga is like, well, yes, if for free will you need evil, what happened in cases like the heaven, for example, right? Where obviously in heaven or what the Bible says about heaven is that there's not going to be any kind of like pain or sorrow or this, right? So if there is no kind of that, and also like, I feel like in Isaiah 65:17, something like that, it says that you're not going
You're
to
not gonna
remember
Yeah.
the bad things.
Yeah.
So I would ask Alvin Plantinga, like, what happens in this case? So I feel like for new Christian philosophers and new theologians, let's start pondering about what happens in the case of heaven. But yeah, that's
Always work to be done there, yeah.
exactly.
And those were two Christian philosophers, correct?
Yeah,
That you-
those are one of the most important philosophers of the century. Both Alvin Plantinga and Nicholas Wolterstorff. Both they were graduates of Calvin.
Sweet. All right, the last question we have is, how do you find hope in the present day while still acknowledging the presence of evil and injustice?
Yeah, so this is probably the most difficult question, right?
For everyone.
For everyone,
Yeah.
exactly. That's why I feel like this is the most interesting argument against Christianity, maybe because when you're a Christian, right, you see all this evil, and you're like, I've talked with tons of Christian philosophers and theologians that even them they say like, oh, this is like the argument that actually make me feel the most agnostic about God. Even Alvin Plantinga, I think he said something about that. But yeah, I feel like to me, we have to understand more how history evolves and our role in history. When you understand more your role in history and you understand more how history evolves, is when you can find a little bit of hope, I would say. Because then you have a more, how can I say, you have way more understanding on we've been actually evolving in some sense, and evil is being maybe less than before. But like if you compare, for example, feudalism, right? In feudalism, most people used to be really unhappy, right? We used to have a lot of troubles.
Yeah.
Now with capitalism, we have a lot of those problems already resolved, like already solved. So we should think also like, where are we right now? When are we? What are the problems that we have right now? What are these problems that are causing a lot of sorrow in the world, a lot of this sadness? And that's where, when you understand your role in history and you let history transform you in order to you transform history, that's where you can think about, okay, let's try to improve the world. Let's try to think about a better system, better interpretations, new interpretations in Christianity, and so on. And yeah, I feel like that's where I find hope myself. Yeah.
Trying to find where you can find your role.
Exactly.
Your
In
niche.
trying to erase all these problems
Yeah.
that are causing suffering.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, thank you so much for being on the show this week.
Yeah, thank
Do
you so
have
much
any
for-
questions for me or
No, actually, like, what do you think about what
About-
you said?
which one?
I don't know. What do you think about problem of evil, and how do you yourself actually deal with this?
Yeah, like you said, everyone has to look at it a certain way and wrestle with it. There was a time when I was a teenager, I wrestled with it a lot, and I think one of the most unsatisfying things is you look in the Bible, right? And you're always told, oh, it's your field guide to life, it's your map. And then you get to the book of Job, and you read that section where he's mourning his life that's just fallen apart. And you can't take him down that same road as we often get tempted to and say, well, he must have sinned, he must have done something wrong, because it doesn't seem to indicate that. And then you get to the final part, and you get this very scary passage about God, visiting him. And he's like, what are you doing? Who are you to question me? How dare you? And that's a hard teaching. And I think we do need to look in that, like you said, different interpretations. How do we stay true to the text and what it's still saying, while also saying, well, maybe our past very literal interpretations of, oh, God is really mad at him right now, God is angry whenever we have questions, maybe that's not quite what he's saying there. Maybe he's almost putting up like a warning. Maybe he's there's a concept called God condescends to our level.
And just to the end. That's what Dostoevsky, I think, he understand actually. He
Yes.
understand a lot of the suffering that was happening, right? That's what you can find in the brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what you find, that he understand the contradictions in society. And actually, if you see the Russian society, they have a lot of contradictions. They used to have a lot of paganism, but also a lot of Christianity. They
Yeah.
have Orthodox Christianity, right?
Yeah.
So in general, it's also good to understand the contradictions behind society and understand that they can also help to move history and understand that exactly there is a lot of suffering, but out of that suffering we can try to improve our world and try to bring less suffering.
Yeah, I think we'd all like that.
Exactly.
All
But
right.
yeah.
Sweet.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and definitely subscribe to this channel. It's a lot of you have a lot of different interesting conversations, and definitely read Dostoevsky. It's really important to understand
Yeah.
suffering and contradictions and all this stuff. Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, you've heard from two people who have honestly faced some of humanity's toughest questions, and will continue to do so for years. See, one of the defining attributes of these questions is that they are lifelong. One of my favorite classes was a Psalms and Wisdom literature class a few years ago, and I loved how every lecture felt like a sermon. Until one day, we got to Ecclesiastes, and my professor ended the lecture in the most unsatisfying way ever. He told us about a bunch of tragedies and historic events, and then let us go. I sat there, confused that he didn't end with a nice point back to the gospel and give us the sermon-like ending that I had grown accustomed to. But that is one of the only lectures that I remember to this day. I had to come up with my own ways of answering the way he ended class. Every time I was faced with these questions, I didn't have an AI spitting out clean answers to me, or anyone who really understood the depths of these matters. One of the goals in this channel is to prepare and inspire you to dare to hope that there is an answer out there to believe in. And that answer is who I want to follow every day of my life, despite these questions. Now, there's a joke that says, many people try to lift the heavy weights in the gym, but the lighter ones are much easier and you can do more stuff with them. Now, we can easily tell how ridiculous this is if people actually want to grow stronger at the gym. But I think that we unironically have this mindset when it comes to faith and the deeper questions in life. In an age of distraction at every opportunity, it is easy to push these questions away and wrestle with the heavy weight of these questions. So I'm going to leave you in a similar way to how my religion professor ended that class. Real injustice exists. There are places in the world that feel like God has abandoned them. And to hide from these questions is to not take your faith seriously. So turn off the screen, ponder these questions, and maybe by the end of it, you will come out a stronger person.